Why do we mourn only those who are close to us? Is that wrong? And why did Jesus cry over someone who he knew he was going to raise from the dead? And how do our Christian traditions factor into this anyways? Let's take a walk. So if somebody dies in another country and you hear about it, we don't really mourn that. I don't think that mourning over someone who's close to us versus not mourning over somebody who dies who's far away from us is wrong. But I do think that in our finite, limited sense, we're not able to fully grasp the true weight of death. We mourn over those who are close, yes, and I think that that's an appropriate reaction. But Jesus, he mourned over somebody who was not only close, he knew Lazarus, he mourned over somebody who he knew he was going to raise from the dead. So what was Jesus doing? Crying and mourning over someone who he knew was only asleep for a little while. I think Jesus mourning over Lazarus demonstrated his understanding of what death was, what death is. Death is evil. Death is hard for us to wrap our minds around because death seems natural. Off the top of your head, everything dies. Everyone dies. But it's not. As the story in Genesis 1 tells us, we didn't die before the fall. Our death is a punishment, a reality of our sin. Our death is something that is foreign and unnatural to us. And I think that Jesus knew something that we didn't know, that we don't know. In our finitude, we can't mourn everyone in the world. I understand that. I'm not saying that we're supposed to mourn everyone in the world. That would be too much. We're too small for that. We're too finite. But we do mourn those who are close to us. And I think in that mourning, we understand something, a very small something, of what God goes through every time any one of us dies. Because even though Jesus knew that Lazarus was going to come back, he knew he was going to resurrect him, God nevertheless, I believe, mourns death as such. Because death as such is evil. Death itself is evil. It is the last great evil that Christ came to defeat on the cross. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. But now we kind of come to another reality in our culture, where we're at in our cultural moment. We're surrounded by materialism. And for those who don't know, materialism is the belief that there is nothing except for the material world around us. As Charles Taylor puts it, we've trapped ourselves in the immanent frame. We can no longer conceive truly of transcendent. Now here's the problem with that. It brutalizes mourning. Materialism is it's caustic. It attacks the very process of mourning. With materialism, you have us floating around, nothing more than atoms, nothing more than stardust. We're just here. We just live and we just die. There's no intrinsic meaning. It makes mourning a joke, a cruel joke. What is the purpose of the pain that we're even going through? Materialism makes death meaningless. Materialism makes death into a cosmic femur break. It's like the difference between giving birth, a woman giving birth, and breaking your femur. Breaking your femur is the worst pain I've heard that a human can endure. And I imagine it would be terrible. But in the aftermath of breaking your femur, after you've undergone that excruciating pain, you kind of have to ask yourself, what was that? What was that pain? Why did I go through that pain? Why? Why did I hurt? And for a woman giving birth, hurting in that context is tied to something so much greater than the pain itself. Giving birth is deeply meaningful. You're bringing another human being into this life, another image bearer of God. And the pain that a woman endures in that moment when she holds the baby, well, it suddenly is put into context. It's given the meaning, which is it's kind of another point that we have to kind of think about. Pain and suffering in the moment. Besides just removing the pain with drugs, whatever it might be, well, besides that, you can't dull or remove the pain. And with mourning, that's kind of the way it is. There's no just stopping it. It's incessant, never ending. It just keeps going. It's a constant agony. And then the question is why? Once you get into your more lucid moments, once you start to think a little bit more clearly between the bouts of an extreme pain, you might sit there and go, why this pain? Why do I do this? Why must I endure this pain? And I don't think you're wrong to ask that question. I don't think we're wrong to ask that of mourning. To ask the question, is mourning more like childbirth, or is mourning more like the femur break? A cosmic joke, whatever cosmic there can be with our materialistic stupor. It's just the entire universe laughing at you. You broke your femur, ha ha. Now you're writhing on the ground in agony and pain, and that's that. The pain might subside, but it never meant anything anyways. But it's not that way. It's not that way. We're not suffering on this earth just for nothing. You see, this is where I must commend the great Christian tradition. And particularly, I think the sovereignty of God within the Reformed tradition is something that in our lucid moments, when we're sitting and resting, and when we fully comprehend the nature of the sovereignty of God, we don't have to be afraid. At least, we don't have to think, oh, all this suffering is so meaningless. It's so purposeless. All the pain that we have to go through. It's just the cosmic femur break? No. God's sovereignty makes pain meaningful. He controls all things. Even the pain that you go through. As the apostle said in Acts regarding the death of Jesus, the most heinous death of all. What they said about that was that every moment was planned by God's hand. And that seems unfathomable to us. But I do want to commend the basic truth of the sovereignty of God for those lucid moments when the mourning kind of settles, when you go from one phase to another, when the roller coaster is, I guess, in the slow part, when you sit there and you ask, why? Why am I even on this roller coaster? In that moment of clarity, you can look to the gospel and you can look to God's sovereign hand, and you can know that this suffering is not meaningless. Something that has to be said here In the moment of pain, in the moment of suffering, especially with mourning, there's nothing that'll make it stop. Nothing. It just keeps going. Sort of like what C.S. Lewis wrote in A Grief Observed. He said, you can put your hand in your lap, you can put your hands on your chest, but when you're in the dentist chair, the drill keeps drilling. I didn't quite get that quote correct, but it's true. Christianity and the truth of Christianity doesn't make the pain any less potent. It doesn't make mourning any less deep. In fact, I think it kind of makes it more painful. Because now we can't look on pain with this sort of cynical pointlessness and say, whatever, I guess I'm just going to suffer. I guess I'm just going to be in pain. Now we can think to ourselves, we can know the truth and we can say, but Lord, why? You are a loving God. Why are you allowing this to happen? But nevertheless, once things calm down and the pain is not so sharp for the moment, we can do as Jesus did. We can say, not my will, but yours be done, Lord. I don't understand, but I know that you are good. The truth of Christianity doesn't make the pain any less. It's not about that. It is truth and it is reality, but the consolation doesn't come until afterwards. It's sort of like, well, again, back to pregnancy. When the woman is in the midst of giving birth, only drugs will dull that pain. But the knowledge of God and the knowledge of Christ and who He is, it's not going to make the pain go away. That's not what it's for. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it makes pain meaningful. The truth that Christ came to this earth, fully God, fully man, lived a life we could not live, perfect, and died a death we could not die, and rose again on the third day so that He can resurrect us through Him. See, the great truth of the gospel and of God's sovereignty is that God has not abandoned us. We're not floating around in a pointless universe. We're not at the hand and the whim of a hateful, unloving God. He loved us so much that He sent His only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in Him will not perish. He loved us so much that He did not leave us to writhe in our agony alone. Instead, He comes to us and He sits down with us and He aches with us.